Fate Intertwined. Written by Lumerians. Read by Arashi. Aventurine is convinced he's bound to die alone, and the 0 messages in his inbox are an undying reminder. Maybe he just skimped out on his future husband whilst swiping through profiles, but no one really stood out to him, aside from that stoic barista at his local coffee shop that would rather kick rocks than pay him any more attention than necessary. He donned a pair of thin-framed glasses, fogging up whenever the steam from the espresso machine hit them. Aventurine thought it was cute, the hint of frustration that rushed through the barista when he's forced to lift up his glasses to continue the brew. And that's why Aventurine keeps ordering an extra hot latte, customized with oat milk for his mornings, maybe a little too obsessively. Whilst waiting at the pickup counter, he watches the way the man pours the creamer into the cup, so smooth to the point you'd think he was an experienced connoisseur. He tries to sneak a few peeks at the barista before stopping, so he doesn't get accused of gawking, though he presumes that barista hasn't caught on. Hopefully. The so-called barista Aventurine had his eyes on was Veritas, though he liked going by his alias, Ratio. Brewing coffee was never one of his favorite pastimes, mostly just a side hustle for earning quick cash to pay off rent at a lousy studio apartment he had, and also for his dog, Matrix. Yes, Matrix was an energetic troublemaker who often got himself into trouble with the other strays outside. Maybe Ratio should have read into how to take care of a dog before committing to one, especially Siberian Huskies. But he was forced into that opportunity when someone from the space station had picked up a young pup who was the sole survivor of an experimental litter. He never paid much attention to the regulars who come in, nor does he shake a leg when they plead for a discount. He just redirects them to the company policy, stated on a poster board, that states no discounts unless they're a corporate sponsor. Often it gets him out of hot water, but sometimes they'd make a fuss and ask for his manager, which then turns his day into a frustrating orchestra. Well, until that well-dressed blonde-haired man came in, every single day for the week now, ordering an extra hot latte with oat milk. Ratio thought nothing of the order. At least it wasn't a sugar bomb of extra toppings, but having it extra hot whilst he wore his glasses pissed him off. Only, if he was that energetic, upbeat barista who'd suggest other drinks, maybe it would have been easier to change that man's mind. But he's not. He's just a barista who works for the sake of the paycheck every month, so he'd ought to suck up the consequences. Though it doesn't mean he doesn't feel a hint of flush or embarrassment when his glasses fog up, and he can just barely make out that vague figure looking at him closely. He was just a stranger, yet he possessed the ability to make Ratio feel self-aware of his surroundings like a psychic. So, when he passes his cup over with an unamused smile, he doesn't expect any words other than "thank you" to come out of that blonde man's mouth. Well, he was wrong. "Thanks. You ought to wear contact lenses next time. Wouldn't want you scorching your hand when you make my daily dose," Aventurine says with a smirk plastered on his face, taking the warm cup in his hands and waving a goodbye. That cheeky remark leaves a shallow hole in Ratio's body, and he's not sure whether to feel insulted or feel amused. So he chooses the latter. Aventurine being his first experience with a regular customer, he really has to get the situation under control, or he'll end up losing it every time he comes in again. Though he struggles to stifle a chuckle at his remark about wearing contact lenses, since Ratio has perfect 20/20 vision. He just wears glasses to look more professional, or so he thinks. Aventurine leaves the coffee shop with a big grin, so big that it makes his cheekbones hurt. He skips along the pavement before whipping out his phone and going back on Tinder. A few angry finger-tappings later, he shuts it off and groans. He's not having any luck with that cursed dating app that has brought many of his friends joy. He's not going to end up like Jade or Topaz, who's been spoiled rotten by admirers. He'll just be friend-zoned, much to his dismay. However, he had one more chance. That cute barista from the coffee shop he just teased earlier. He remembers that surprised look on his face. And then he wonders how it'd look if he asks him out on a date, or when they kiss, or when he's happy, and maybe he's running a little off tangent because he bumps straight into the street lamp down the pavement. Thankfully, no one witnessed that embarrassing scene, because he'd cease to exist if laughter followed up. Making his way back to his apartment, he feels ready to continue his remote job, journaling for a local newspaper. Aventurine wasn't the brightest tool in the shed. He'd admit that. Aside struggling to sell out sponsorships and insurance policies, the only thing he excelled at was writing. Quitting his corporate job at an insurance company, he decided to take on journalism, working for a small local newspaper that published ratings and reviews on restaurants all around town. He wrote a few drafts for the upcoming compilation of top-rated restaurants for September, knowing that specific coffee shop was pitched in there by him. Finishing up the drafts and handing them in for a final review, he checks the time on his laptop and realizes the clock had striked 12 p.m., a little late for dinner. And so, despite being a capable, well-off adult, he settles for a cup of instant noodles to fill his stomach for the night. It's comforting. It's warm. Similar to how he'd probably feel with a man to hug to sleep every night. But he's not going to dwell on his bad dating experience when he's yet to shoot his shot with that cute barista. Aventurine then realizes his mind has been on a loop about him, prompting him to dive headfirst into his pillows in shame. His shift ends, and God, Ratio is dying to get back home and dive straight to bed. He's had an ordeal with customers screaming profanities when they've not had their way, and frankly, he's not had his way working there anyway. Walking to his apartment's floor, he fumbles with the keys before unlocking the door. He's greeted by his dog, who basically tackles him down, but all he manages is a huff and pushes him off gently, emptying his dog bowl and preparing his evening meal. Usually his friend comes in to help feed Matrix, so it's not a big deal, though morning and evening meals are often prepared by Ratio himself. Placing the filtered bowl, he watches Matrix gnaw at it and pick at it before he washes the empty bowl and dries it in his dishwasher. Taking a swift bath, he nearly falls asleep before he hears the pounding of the door from a whiny Matrix who probably thought he lost his owner. Unironically, he's not the same when the front door is open and he's scampering out on free will. He dries himself, putting on a random shirt and multicolored shorts before making a beeline for the bed, drifting off to a sweet slumber for the weekend. The weekend comes faster than expected for Aventurine, the man tossing on his sneakers and adjusting his coat before leaving the house. He admits he's only heading out to get a coffee as an excuse to see that cute barista again, in hopes he's working Saturdays. On his usual walk to the coffee shop, which is a few blocks away, he sees a dog, a big Siberian husky, with a collar and tag running across the street, stopping just short in front of him. Walking over to examine the tag, he sees Matrix carved on the metal, with a phone number and a name he presumes to be the owner on the back. Veritas Ratio, the other name on the tag wrote, and Aventurine scratches his head in amusement. He's never had such a name roll off his tongue, nor has he ever met someone who donned a name. Maybe it was his luck, because the cute barista he's been aching to meet since last night catches up to the dog, eyes meeting him. He's shocked, stunned to the core, and takes his hands off Matrix's collar. He's about to make an exit before the dog grabs at his leg, pinning himself all over Aventurine. Ratio could only sigh, tugging at his collar incessantly to prompt him to lay off. Matrix does, though it's not with a whine. "He's your dog?" Aventurine asks with a slight eyebrow twitch. Yes, his name is Matrix. Didn't expect for him to get out and run down the block, Ratio says, brushing off debris from his jeans. Aventurine is about to poke fun at the name before he decides to catch his tongue and ask about something else, but Ratio has already popped the question. Were you looking for me? He asks, trying not to choke on his words, before correcting himself. I mean, I don't work on Saturdays. Sorry if that's weird of me to assume. Aventurine feels something tug on his heart, and he's all of a sudden flustered, like a deer caught in headlights. Unable to respond, Ratio only looks at him, cocking an eyebrow. Then he breaks out in a smile Aventurine has never seen before. It sends him into a heart attack. What do you do? Ratio asks, walking past the blonde. He's at a loss, but then follows him, catching up to him just enough to walk alongside him on the small pavement. Sorry? What do you do for a living? You seem like a new bachelor. Am I wrong? Ratio says, his eyes tracing the healed scars on Aventurine's face. So minuscule, yet noticeable in daylight, the way his jawline feels sculpted and carved, like an artisanal delicacy. And just maybe, Ratio is interested in him, despite never diving into romance his entire life. I used to work at an insurance company. I currently do content writing for a newspaper, Aventurine says, but God, that sounded more pathetic than he was expecting. But Ratio only nods and hums. Do you want to hit the cafe? I can drop Matrix off with my coworkers. They'll take care of him. Ratio offers, and unable to hold his excitement, Aventurine agrees. The pair make their way to the coffee shop, and the familiar smell of coffee beans and freshly baked pastries hits Aventurine harder than he expects. Maybe it was time for him to admit his caffeine dependence. He goes to the counter, ready to order his usual, when Ratio comes up to interrupt his transaction. Put it on me. Staff's discount, and also add an iced Americano with that, he says, flashing his employee pass. The barista at the counter chokes up, nodding profusely as he closes the bill, passing the receipt to his higher-up, or rather, senior. He sheepishly shuffles to brew the espresso for their drinks. Aventurine watched the barista shudder when Ratio interrupted the conversation and wondered how long he'd been working for his presence to have such an effect on a regular employee. Sitting near to an open window that allowed sunlight to sit perfectly on the side of Ratio, he sees his light skin glowing beneath like dazzling stars, practically blinding him. When a call was made for their names, Ratio hushes and prompts Aventurine to stay put while he goes to get their drinks for them. He has to say, he's never not had to fight to make an ideal impression for a date, but Ratio's breaking all of the social norms for him like glass. Taking the seat opposite him, they take a sip of their coffee as their ongoing conversation drowns out any lingering noise from the crowd around them. Ratio brushes his hair away from his face in a swift motion, the purple strands framing his face perfectly that it catches Ratio's attention. So, you work for a newspaper? What do you write about mostly? Political? Business? Trends? Ratio breaks the ice again, whilst taking another sip of his coffee, the caffeine rejuvenating him instantly. I mostly do trends, just like I submitted the top restaurants and establishments for September, Aventurine replies, and the realization that it's October strikes him earlier than expected. Ratio nods, gears turning in his brain, figuring out what to ask next. Soon, the conversation turns dry with exchanges of knowing looks and stifled giggles between them. So, what brought you to work as a barista? Money. I have to live alone, pay rent, and also with Matrix and stuff. Not fun, but I do it for the paycheck. Is it not enough? That sounds rough, especially with having a dog. Dogs are a lifetime commitment. Ratio laughs before he tells him his dog was given to him to take care of. He figures it helped him with taking care of others early on in his adulthood. Aventurine lets out some oohs and ahs, learning about Ratio, but that lingering question itches in the back of his mind. He's wanting to ask him on a date, perhaps make him his, but he's not really sure if Ratio wants the same, and it's frustrating him like a rash. Their conversation settles, and Aventurine has to fight the urge to bring up that question. Walking down the same path after leaving the coffee shop, Ratio manages to pick up Matrix from his co-worker's hands and get him under the leash. The walk is silent. Only the sounds of Matrix's chains and leash could be heard, alongside the rustling of leaves when the wind blew across. Ratio's about to lead the way up to Aventurine's apartment complex when he stops in his tracks, turning back to face the man with a soft smile. "Will I see you again?" Aventurine grins, though this was his opportunity to make a cheeky remark back. "You have to convince me to see you again." "Okay. Do you want to go on a date with me?" He laughs this time, and Ratio could only cock his head to the side to meet the smiling man. "Will it be coffee again? I don't third wheel." "Just us. A candlelit dinner. How does 6 sound?" He brings his phone up to Aventurine, his lock screen depicting the time now being 2 p.m., early in the afternoon. The latter nods, and he catches himself trying hard not to blush furiously against his will. "I'll see you again then," Ratio says, before waving a sweet goodbye. Prior to that, he doesn't stop himself from embracing Aventurine between his arms and asking if it's okay before he plants a wet kiss on his forehead like a lucky charm, and the blonde feels like he's been blessed. Just maybe, his love life wasn't a disaster after all. He thinks as he goes to delete his Tinder profile and the numerous other dating apps he installed beforehand, wincing at the disgusting comments and messages he's received from people that were just looking for a bang. He sighs, looking at his reminders that stated his upcoming date in a few hours' time. Who knew dogs and coffee would bring him into such a situation?